Chapter 12. The number 3. The deity is one because it is infinite. It is triple because it is ever manifesting, the Kabbalah. The King of Ages, the merciful and gracious God, the exalted one, the dweller in eternity, most high and holy, engraved his name by the 3 seraphim, numbers, letters, and sounds, Seper Yetzirah, chapter. Since 1 is unity and hence no number, 3 is called the first odd number. 3 is the number of the Trinity, hence divine. In number 1 the divine came down into manifestation, in 2 it was met by the inertia of matter, but in 3 it penetrated into matter and manifested the only begotten Son. This process is illustrated by the equilateral triangle A, in which the positive and negative forces from the dot above bring forth a stable manifestation on the physical plane, the baseline. The triangle is the first geometrical figure, for the number 2 is like 2 straight lines which can never enclose a space, and therefore it is powerless till the number 3 forms a triangle. Again, the triangle may be considered as spirit and matter united by mind. Number 3 is sacred and divine because it symbolizes the threefold deity, the Trinity, the Father, the Mother, and the Son, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost of the Christians, the Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu of the Hindus, the Osiris, Isis, and Horus of the Egyptians, etc. In another aspect, 3 is the number of the 3 manifestations of deity, the logoi. The first logos is unity, the undifferentiated. The second logos is a trinity of the one life, spirit matter, and cosmic consciousness. The third logos is manet, cosmic ideation, or universal mind. 3 is the number of the mystery of life. Stinson Jarvis, in his articles on the Druids, 1 states that the Druids described deity as being 1 and 2 and 3, and, by itself, RT means 3, and our word tri, meaning 3, named this number from the Isthmus of Darien to the remote Pacific Islands, showing that there was 1 Druid word-making for the entire world, and 1 priesthood to carry our words into every country. Father Smitty says, 3 was the Druid mystical number. With them nearly all things resolved themselves into a trine. This was the DOC trine, or trine teaching preached in America for ages, and Trinite says 3, Heaven Island God. 3 is the number of the trilogies used to measure the manifestations of all things to the human consciousness, such as substance, life, intelligence, matter, force, consciousness, heat, light, electricity, length, breadth, thickness, creation, preservation, dissolution, thinker, thought, thing thought of, etc. By some 3 is loosely spoken of as the number of man because of his division into body, soul, and spirit, but as this is only a superficial and exoteric division, 3 is not properly man's. Symbol as 3 includes past, present, and future. It is sometimes called the number of time. It is also called the middle or the analogy, because all comparisons are expressed in 3 terms, good, bad, and indifferent. The Egyptian Trinity is composed of Osiris, water, especially their sacred river Nile, Isis, earth, especially the land of Egypt over which she reigned, and Horus, air, especially the moist warm air after the overflow of the Nile in spring. Thus the Nile represented to the Egyptians the great fertilizing power of the Father, and at its annual overflow there was great rejoicing, and many religious rites were celebrated because Osiris was fecundating the Queen Mother, Isis. After the river receded, the entire valley, which before the overflow was dry and brown, was covered with the tender green of the spring crops. The moist, balmy air which pervades the valley at that time was considered the child of Isis and Osiris, Horus. If the rains in the interior were late and the rising of the Nile was delayed, processions were formed and prayers offered entreating Osiris to look upon his spouse with favor. In astronomy, recent discoveries have revealed a trinity in the motions of the stars, each having three distinct motions: rotatory, orbital, linear, i.e., each rotates on its axis, gyrates around the central sun of its system, and also drifts toward a point outside its zodiac. Just so does each soul have its inner point about which it rotates, its spiritual sun about which it gyrates and which determines the orbit of its evolution, and also its destiny or place in the grand plan of the universe, toward which it is steadily being swept by the great law while evolving the qualities necessary to enable it to fulfill its destiny. In addition to the two great star streams well known to astronomers, a third but much smaller stream has recently been discovered which is independent of the other two. Such is the mysterious law called gravitation, that the heavenly bodies are not only bound together by mutual attraction, but are also held at relatively fixed distances apart, as though gravitation brought them only so near to each other and some counter-repellent force kept them from approaching nearer. In reality, that which limits their nearer approach is the limits of their auras. Of these three star streams, one is going outward into manifestation, a cycle requiring some eons of ages, and one stream is going inward to its rest or pralaya, while the third and smaller stream is composed of those stars and systems which have attained mastery and become independent of the other two streams, in other words, have become immortal for the cycle of the Mahamanvantara or Great World Period. Just so are there three streams of humanity, one going out into manifestation and incarnation, one going inward to rest between incarnations, and a third and very small stream of those who have attained mastery and immortality for this Manvantara or world period. Science has recently discovered that the entire visible universe is a huge spiral made up of a series of lesser spiral systems. It has long been known that the giant nebulae, or world systems in the process of formation, are spiral in shape, each having its central nucleus or dot from which the system emanated. And since the outline of a spiral is A, we see that the A with a dot at the apex is a cosmic symbol which correctly portrays the law of manifestation, of individuals, of worlds, of universes. For the life cycle of all forms of manifestation is spiral in character. As above, so below. We may think our lives are on a dead level, because our physical, mental, and spiritual lives may seem to be but a succession of days and nights in which we experienced similar conditions, but by a study of the law we find that all evolution is in spirals, each life having its personal, racial, and universal motions. Hence we find that as we evolve we pass over, again and again, the decisive points in our lives, but at each repetition we are on a little higher round of experience and attainment. Each race as a whole, and the planet itself, also have their spirals of evolution. The widespread manifestation of triplicates is shown in the celestial signs, each of which has a fixed, movable, and common quaternion, also 3 decans. Among these signs there is a triplicity for each of the 4 elements. Thus, the fire signs are Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, the earth signs Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, the air signs Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, the water signs Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Astrologers also regard the third day after the new moon as the most fortunate day of the month. The Hermetics had three symbolic animals connected with their magic: the bull, symbol of earth or philosophic salt; the dog, Hermanubis, the mercury of the sages or fluid, air and water; the goat, symbol of fire and generation. 3 is also the number of the Akasha, the so-called veil of deity, the great storehouse of all events, past, present, and future. 3 is the number of divine love, also man, woman, and the magnetic attraction between them united in the divine. It is divine love overshadowing and manifesting through the two witnesses mentioned in Revelation, i.e., man and woman. For every true marriage in which human love reaches up to and blends with divine love is a witness on earth that divine love has been able to penetrate into and manifest through humanity. 3 is therefore the number of a perfect marriage made in heaven, or the masculine and feminine expression of human love united above the earth in divine love, the completion of the triangle. The triangle is preeminently the symbol of the triune Godhead. But all manifestations of that Godhead must contain a reflection of the triangle: A, the inner reality; B, the outer manifestation; and C, the life force which unites the two, else the deity would not be represented in his works. As number 2 symbolizes the one race separated and manifested upon the physical plane in the pairs of opposites, so number 3 symbolizes the evolution of the pairs of opposites to a point of perfect balance or at one-ment with their source, the divine merging into them that it may uplift and redeem them. In other words, in 3 there is the dot which overshadows each pair of opposites, A, the goal toward which they are evolving. The state of perfection which will manifest when the experience of both extremes has been garnered and indrawn to the point above the physical plane. Number 3 therefore symbolizes the balance of all manifested things in the Godhead, is a prophecy of their ultimate perfection and their unity in the divine. Hence the sacredness with which number 3 has always been regarded in religions. Applying this triune principle to humanity, we find that man and woman, being the dot microcosm of the macrocosm and embodying all the pairs of opposites in nature, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, good and evil, etc., must ultimately find their completion, balance, and perfection in union in the dot, and the divine marriage, above the physical plane. As they advance toward this perfection, they will, of necessity, balance all the pairs of opposites manifesting in their microcosm. All souls are pre-existent in the world of emanations, and are in their original state androgynous, but when they descend upon the earth they become separated into male and female, and inhabit different bodies. If therefore in this mortal life the male half encounters the female half, a strong attachment springs up between them, and hence it is said that in marriage the separated halves are again conjoined, and the hidden forms of the soul are akin to the cherubim. Since the great goal toward which all manifested things are evolving is the reunion of the many in the one from which they emanated, as the positive and negative poles express on earth, they are ever seeking to return to their unity in the dot. Hence they attract or reach toward each other. Figure 2. When they unite and are balanced, they bring forth a third line, the base of the triangle or the only begotten Son. Figure 3. The triangle is therefore the symbol of satisfaction, for the only true satisfaction is the response we feel to the force poured out through some form of union with the divine. The only real satisfaction is experienced in the thrill of oneness that comes when a ray from the divine within us finds expression in manifestation on any plane, physical, mental, or spiritual, from the thrill that results from an unselfish deed, a kind word, or a generous forgiveness, to the ecstasy of conscious union with the higher self in the highest initiation, or in that most mystical sacrament, the marriage of the Lamb. Union between the positive and negative poles of dissimilar rays may make a union on the physical plane, but it can never bring more than physical satisfaction. And as this can be but temporary, it cannot bring that true happiness which results from union on all planes. As man and woman are the lords of creation, so must they in turn become the redeemers, the dot above, of the lower kingdoms, and lift up all lower aspects of creation into a higher octave of expression. Even as Jesus said of the Christ within, "If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me," so as man and woman are united and lift up the Christ within them, will they draw all the lower pairs of opposites, the lower kingdoms, unto them. Today there are many who, awakening to the vital ideal of true marriage, are no longer satisfied with the mere husks or outer conceptions of life so long considered satisfying. They realize that in contracting a marriage, the religious aspirations of both the man and the woman should be centered in the same spiritual ideals, the same dot above, so that as both evolve and advance toward the realization of those ideals, they may grow ever closer and closer. Thus, we may illustrate this by the following diagram, which is intended to be merely illustrative and not literal. If, for instance, a positive personality of the higher self A unites with a negative personality of the same higher self A, to which it could alone truly belong, as they each advance spiritually and evolve upward toward the higher self of each, they must necessarily grow closer to each other, for they are evolving toward union with the same overshadowing. But if a positive personality of the higher self A should unite with a negative personality of another, or higher self, of which it is not an emanation, say of the higher selves B or C, then as each personality advanced spiritually and evolved upward along its way toward union with its higher self, instead of the personalities growing closer together on all planes, they must inevitably grow farther and farther apart on the higher planes, and this must ultimately lead to separation on the physical plane, for each one is evolving toward union with a different. Thus, therefore, there may develop great inharmony on the physical plane, not because they are becoming less spiritual, but because they are advancing and being drawn into different currents of force which do not harmonize. And as the great law of divine love ever seeks greater and more perfect expressions of harmony, when whatever physical harmony there may have been at first has expressed itself, the great law tends to separate them, that each may be able to manifest a higher state of harmony. In such cases, separation on the physical plane, instead of being a calamity, is a blessing and an absolute necessity for the spiritual advance of each. In the marital relations of the present day, these spiritual lines of force are woefully mixed and tangled, both through the karma of similar mistakes in the past and through allowing other considerations than divine love to bring about union on the physical plane. No matter how eugenically perfect the animal bodies of the parents may be, perfect love is the only force that will attract advanced souls to incarnation in the perfect bodies furnished by the parents. Without it, only such souls will be attracted as are willing to incarnate under the loveless conditions offered. But as we enter into the cycle of the new Aquarian age, there must be a great readjustment and untangling process carried out as rapidly as the working out of past karma permits, so that each may return to his or her true spiritual allegiance and make straight the crooked paths of spiritual force ere the coming of the Christ. For the Christ, the essence of the divine, cannot manifest in perfection until its positive and negative vehicles are united and the path made straight. Thus, this is illustrated by the story of John the Baptist being clothed in skins and crying in the wilderness, for the soul is clad in its animal nature, skin, and wanders in the wilderness of the outer life until the path is made straight and a way for the manifestation of divine love through the law of unity is prepared. Therefore, from a geometrical standpoint, we see that a marriage can never be truly harmonious unless there is a common source of interest or aspiration outside of and above the personalities, in which the two can unite, or a common, into which the sides of the human triangle can merge. Even though both are expressions of the same divine self, if they are at all spiritually advanced and one of the two seeks further spiritual advance through one school of religious or occult teaching while the other seeks in a divergent school, for instance, if one be a Catholic and the other a Protestant, or one an occultist and the other an Orthodox literal Christian, they must at least temporarily grow apart in the higher realms, even if they remain together on the physical plane, because they are separated in the higher realization and expression of their oneness. Of course, such persons will come together ultimately through a higher understanding, but only after a period of suffering which should be unnecessary. In such cases, the course of their evolution, first separating for a time and then returning, may be represented, not by a triangle, but by a hexagram, the figure which forms the center of the interlaced triangles. Thus, this figure is the center of the seal of Solomon or the heart of wisdom. Hence they will reach their true union through the suffering of spiritual loneliness, etc., only after they have found the heart of wisdom. And if one subordinates his or her spiritual ideals to the other, the spiritual growth of both is retarded. In other words, only as the lives of both are blended on all planes and are centered in a common ideal outside of and above their personalities, can they grow into that perfect spiritual oneness represented by the overshadowing A. As this spiritual oneness is attained, the two manifestations grow closer and closer together on the baseline, the physical plane, until finally, instead of reaching the divine along slanting, complementary lines forming the sides of the triangle, the forces from each are indrawn to the center where they blend into the vertical line, the straight and narrow path, which reaches in oneness direct to the divine within. Thus, therefore, we would say that the effective remedy for the divorce evil is to teach, firstly, the necessity for a oneness of spiritual ideals, and secondly, the necessity of both souls following the divine guidance of their overshadowing, until, through prayer and meditation, they receive the positive assurance from within that their lines of spiritual evolution converge toward the same spiritual or that their souls had emerged from and are evolving back to same divine source, the creative or oversoul overshadowing the one triangle. But before they can do this, they must be sure that they have freed themselves of self-deception and a determined self-will which makes the thing they want seem to be the right thing, even though it requires excuse after excuse to make it plausible. On the other hand, do not be too hasty in deciding that each is evolving toward a different center, for it may be that in reality both are seeking the same point, but have not yet found the straight and narrow path common to both, or even realized that their complementary lines will ultimately reach the same, for even the fact that they have recognized their spiritual unity does not mean that there will be no more unpleasant lessons to learn. No friction in the adjustments necessary on the physical plane. But whatever frictions may develop and whatever inharmonies may assail them, their unity in the higher realms will enable them to recognize the true nature of these and look upon them as tests meant to prove them, while the overshadowing divine love will give them the strength to overcome such conditions and make them but transitory storms which clear the air. A little extra patience and toleration and a willingness to give up a preconceived idea as to what is the only or best way to reach the goal may open their eyes to the fact that each is seeking the same divine, but has a different way of manifesting it for the time being. Only as we permit the divine to shine into our hearts and draw our souls into oneness with it can we attain the wisdom and love which will draw to us that which is our own and reveal to us beyond the possibility of mistake our next step. This teaching must not be made the excuse for divorce without adequate causes for a union, even though it may not be ideal, may nevertheless be the means of teaching the most important lessons of this incarnation. And as we do not limit ourselves to the one-life period, there is plenty of time for adjustment in accordance with the law.